Hey everyone, welcome to the third 6 weeks review. This review covers basically all chapter 4, chapter 4.1 through 4.5. That being said, let's get started. Compute the discriminant and give the number and type of solutions, then solve using the quadratic formula. So you have 3x squared plus 22x equals negative 35. So I wrote down the formula for the discriminant and the quadratic formula. You'll recall that the discriminant is a piece of the quadratic formula. So before you can do anything, get everything on one side. So I need to add that 35 over to the other side. So I'm going to start off by writing 3x squared plus 22x plus 35 equals 0. So that's leaving me with an a of 3, a b of 22, and a c of 35. Alright, so now just for the discriminant, we'll just plug everything in. So I'm just going to write d is b squared, so 22 squared, minus 4, times a is 3, and c is 35. That's going to equal 64. So my discriminant is 64. You'll recall that if you have two positive solutions, if you have a positive discriminant, you're going to have two real solutions. And if the discriminant's equal to 0, you have one real solution. If the discriminant is negative, you'll have two imaginary solutions. You'll have no real solution. Okay, so that's the discriminant. I hope you've been writing small, because now you need to do the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b, and so let's look at b again. It was 22, so I'm going to write negative 22 plus or minus, and then I'm just going to write the square root of 64 here, all over 2a, and a was 3. Okay, so let's simplify what we can simplify. Let's see here. So the square root of 64 is 8. So what I can write down now is x equals negative 22 plus or minus 8 over 6. And so let's just do the math, okay? So we have negative 22 plus 8 over 6. And then we have negative 22 minus 8 over 6. So plugging both of those in, I'm going to get negative 7 over 3 for one of the answers, and then negative 5 for the other answer. So you can say x equals negative 7 over 3, and then you can write and x equals negative 5. Cool. Alright. Let's keep going. What's the solution to the following equations? Alright, so this is from 4.5, and so you have two quadratic equations. You're going to type these into the calculator, except you're going to do this one's an f of 1 of x, and then this one's an f of 2 of x. You don't have to type that part in, just type in this part. Alright. Once you have these typed in, you're going to go to Menu, Analyze Graph, and get the intersection. So, what's the intersection going to look like? So plugging these in, you'll see that they intersect here at negative 1, negative 11, and 1.3, comma, negative 5 point. Basically, it's negative 5.5 forever. So then I just wrote those down below. And that's really it. Okay. 3a, solve by completing the square. So, by completing the square, you need to take that third number and add or subtract it to the other side, depending on its sign. So I'm going to add 39 to the other side, and I have x squared plus 10x equals 39. So I need to add something here. What am I going to add? So you take that middle number, divide by 2, and square it. And that's going to equal 25. So I'm going to add in a 25 here. But what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So I'm going to add in 25 to the other side. Now, you need to factor the left. The left is a perfect square trinomial. So your factors of 25 that add up to 10 are 5 and 5. So I'm going to write for my next step, x plus 5 squared equals, and then what is 39 plus 25? That's going to be 64. So x plus 5 squared equals 64. Now we have something squared equals a number, so you're going to square root both sides, and then you get x plus 5 equals, the square root of 64 is 8, but don't forget your plus or minus 8. And then once you do that, just minus 5 over, and you get x equals negative 5 plus or minus 8. So when it's something like this, you want to get your two answers. Do x equals negative 5 plus 8. Well, that's 3. And then do x equals negative 5 minus 8. And that's going to be negative 13. And those would be our two answers. Okay? Okay, so moving on to the next one, I need to solve this by factoring, which means I need to add 60 to the other side. I need to get everything on one side. So that's going to leave me with x squared plus 16x plus 60 equals 0. So what are my factors of 60 that add up to 16? 10 times 6 makes 60, and 10 plus 6 is 16. So I'm going to write x plus 10 times x plus 6. And normally if there's a number greater than 1 in front of x squared, you'd have to divide it out, but there isn't. So dividing anything by 1 is getting right back to whatever you were dividing it by. So, is itself. Anyway, this is the final factored form. X plus 10 times x plus 6 equals 0. So what are your two answers? Your two answers are the opposite signs. Negative 10 plus 10 would make 0, and negative 6 plus 6 would equal 0. And that's it. We did it. It's over. Number 6. Okay, multi-part question here. So, simplify. This is adding like terms, okay? Maybe I'll color code this. So, what's 5 plus 12? That's 17. Alright. What's 2i minus 5i? That's negative 3i. That's the final answer. Next one. What is... So, a lot of people mess up on these, so before I actually do anything, I'm going to distribute this negative, and then I'm just going to write everything on one line. So what's 22 plus 13i minus 9 minus 5i? So now I'll do like terms. 22 minus 9 is 13. And 13i minus 5i is 8i. So I'll write plus 8i since it's positive. And that's the final answer there. All right, moving on to C. Let's distribute this negative. So 2 minus 4 minus 2i minus 2i. So let's combine like terms. 2 minus 4 and then minus 2i minus 2i. So let's see here. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. And negative 2i would just make negative 4i. And that's that. Okay, so D, a bit more work because you got to multiply. So what's 10 times 2? That's 20. What's 10 times 5i? That's 50i. What is I times 2? That's 2i. What is I times 5? That's 5i squared. So let's talk about this 5i squared for a minute. So I is the square root of -1. So if I were to square I, then I'm going to square the square root of -1, which means I'm just left with -1. So for the next line here, I'm going to write 20 plus 50i plus 2i plus 5 times -1. All right, and then 5 times -1 is just -5. So you could just write -5 if you want. So let's combine like terms. Let's combine 50 and 2i, so that's plus 52i. And then let's combine 20 with -5. So 20 minus 5 is 15. So I have 15 plus 52i. That's standard form. Standard form has the regular number coming first and then the imaginary number coming second. You see how I had that pattern going for all my answers. So yeah, make sure you distribute when you're multiplying. You should have 4 terms when you multiply with 2 binomials. And then I squared will turn into a -1. And so just multiply that number by -1. And that's the main takeaway on that one. Okay, last one here, solve by square roots method. So first thing you got to do is get something to square root. So let's -8 over there. All right, so I have -x minus 3 squared equals -8. So it's tempting to divide right now and you'd have like an imaginary solution, but no, there's a negative on the outside of the parentheses. So you can like divide by -1, and so you can just get x minus 3 equals 8. Oh, squared. So now square root. The square root of 8, how would that simplify? Okay, so square root of 8 is square root of 4 times 2. And the square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. And the square root of 2 wouldn't simplify, so I'm going to write the square root of 8 equals plus or minus 2 square root 2. So I'm going to start, resume the problem up here. So I'm going to write x minus 3, because that's the square root of x minus 3 squared, equals plus or minus 2 square root 2. And then I will add 3 to the other side. And then I get x equals 3 plus or minus 2 square root 2. And I'll leave it like that because I don't feel like typing that into the calculator. 3 plus 2 square root 2 and 3 minus 2 square root 2. So yeah, that's it. So that's the we do side. Why don't you knock out the you do side? And let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, or just ask me in person if you're one of my students. Okay, goodbye everyone. Oh, and here are the answers when you work them out yourself so you can check your work. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes myself, but yeah, so here's the front page. Here's the second page. And now that is that. Goodbye, everyone. Good luck on your test.